Thank you, Faiz. Um, very good afternoon, everybody. As Faiz introduced, I'm Peter. I'm the founder and CEO of Empact and your host today, right? Yeah, I think when I looked at the sign off, I was really pleasantly surprised, and we have a very diverse audience today, right? So as Faiz mentioned, we have not only all of you from different geographic locations, but we also have many of you representing different sort of wearing different hats, right, in the social ecosystem, whether you are academic, you are a government agency, you are founders, you are nonprofits or social enterprise friends, and very, very warm welcome, right? And I also noticed many of the audience really have been in the sector for very long. So you probably know a lot of things that I'm going to say, and I will probably invite you to share your perspective as well. And we also have some new friends, right? Especially, I saw we have quite a number of participants join from China who are currently working in corporates and are very interested, to set up your own fund, not only in China, but also, potentially considering Singapore and Hong Kong, right? So very warm welcome. So today's session is really going to be a bit challenge for all of the speakers because we really have to find ways to connect with all of you speaking the language. And also, I think in the social sector, a lot of time we use different jargon. So if you don't understand, feel free to type in the chat to say, okay, what does this word of NPO means, right? So if you don't know, feel free to ask. There's really no stupid questions. Okay, so I think among many friends, and there are also some of you who may not have heard of Empact, maybe I just do a quick introduction of ourselves. So Empact is a social enterprise that I founded in 2011. And a bit of my founding story is I come from China. When I came to Singapore in 2006, I started volunteering. At the time, I was working as a financial consultant, and I started with volunteering. Something really puzzled me. I'm sure some of you are in the commercial sector may have similar questions as well. When I started volunteering, uh, in my day job as a financial consultant, I feel that I'm a valued talent in my own organization, right? But when I started volunteering in charity, when I talk to the finance people, HR people, that a lot of time they said, we have a very lean team because to the organization, we are not considered as asset. We are considered as overheads or maybe sometimes, it's an additional cost, right? That really surprised me at the time because for me, met many wonderful people in the social sector, right, really pouring their hearts into making more impact. But at the same time, because of some of the funding restrictions, it is very hard to attract talents who have finance, tech, background. And we all know, without these talents or skills, it's very hard, to scale the impact to help more people as what we want. With that notion, and I would like to try to solve, this gap about helping organization in the social sector not only more impactful, but more productive, being well governed, and most importantly, being financially sustainable, right? So that's the goal that Impact is working towards, helping organizations and individual working in the social sector to achieve this. And by providing a few things, I have a wonderful team that works in the different areas, helping organizations to measure their impact, looking at specific social sector technologies, doing strategy reviews, looking to volunteer and staff management, and last but not least, looking into financial advisory, or even for some of small and medium charities, we become their shared uh, finance or shared CFO functions, right? So that's a little bit about what we do. And over the past, I think past, maybe it's already 13 years, these are the sort of the number of stakeholder we have helped. And maybe many of you, even those who are familiar with us, you may not know that, when we started in Singapore as a social enterprise, and last year we made a decision to sort of expand and try to share our knowledge into Hong Kong and mainland China, and that's why we set up a nonprofit in Hong Kong and a social enterprise in China as well, right? So that's a little bit about us. And now back to the event to say, people ask me, why are you doing this event, and why, apart from sharing Singapore insights, right? Why are you doing it cross-border, sharing something about Hong Kong and mainland China? I think for me, I will leave Caps to talk a little bit more about what doing good index is about, right? But for me, I just want to share some perspective why I would like to put together an event, not only sharing about Singapore insights, but also Hong Kong and mainland China. Well, selfishly, as you know, that we are already in these locations, right? And I spend quite a bit of time learning the similarities and differences in the social sector, and wonder how can we bring our knowledge into different location, right? So that's the reason why I used our value, that the three value that are guiding us and applying for this event. One is really about really understand, as a capacity builder, we want to provide service and provide values to the needs of the community, right? So, and nothing beats in the social sector using data to understand what are the needs, and also finding professionals to share about that needs. That's why we have different experts you'll be hearing later. And also, while talking to them, I find that in different society there are different challenges, and it's really good to hear the ground up innovations, and I would like to profile them. And last but not least, I think this sector is different from commercial sector. Collaboration is really the key, right? And then collaboration usually it's quite challenging, is because we all wear different hats, we speak different languages, and here in this event we even have to turn on captions to translate into different languages, and we have different terms altogether. So I think for us it's also about collaboration starts with having conversation, and that's why we are having this event, and inviting you to listen to the conversation and join, be part of the conversation, ask me as many questions as you want, or share your perspective in the chat. So that's just a little bit why we are doing this event. So back to you, Faiz.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for giving us a context of the whole session. Now, may I invite Ms. Annalot from Center for Asian Philanthropy and Society, CAPS, to share on the Doing Good Index 2024. Ms. Annalot is Director of Research at the Center for Asian Philanthropy and Society. She's responsible for designing, managing, and overseeing CAPS research projects across the region, including the Doing Good Index, which covers 17 Asian economies. Dr. Walsh has worked across academia, international NGOs, and non-profit sectors in Hong Kong, Australia, the Netherlands, and Tanzania. So before I hand over the session to Ms. Annalot, a gentle reminder to members of the audience that you may use the Zoom chat to ask questions on the presentation. Ms. Annalot, please.
Okay, let me just share my slides as I start. Okay, I hope they're all visible now. Thank you, Faiz, for the introduction, and thank you, Peter, for the little bit of an explanation of why we're doing this. It's an absolute honor to share the findings, not just for Singapore, but some key insights for Singapore, Hong Kong, and China on this presentation today. Before I start, I'd like to just express my thanks, first of all, to Empact as our valued partner in Singapore. Without Empact, it would not be possible to collect the data in Singapore. They have been instrumental in getting all of the data from the respondents, the survey respondents. So our thanks to that, and thank you for hosting this event. It is also a first for us. We tend to usually have these events where we focus just on the data of one, but this one, as I'll go through the slides, very much focuses on a comparative angle, which provides a very interesting, unique perspective as well. So without further ado, let me start and dive into the Doing Good Index. Now, I don't think it will come as a surprise to anyone if I say that the region as a whole continues to face a multitude of social and economic challenges. In fact, the region as a whole is about 32 years behind schedule in achieving the social development goals. And many economies have actually been pushed back a few years because of the due to the COVID pandemic. The good news is, though, that there is a lot of potential in Asia. Amidst a slowing global economy, Asia is projected to remain the engine of growth, contributing 60% of global GDP. At the same time, there is also a lot of rising wealth, from the extremely wealthy, but also to the middle class. There is a general increase in wealth in the region. And with that increasing wealth is the opportunity of more social giving. We use the term private social investment throughout this presentation, and that refers to all the different ways in which private money is being brought to bear for social good. This includes philanthropy, it includes impact investing, it includes CSR, all the ways in which money from private individuals and companies is directed towards social needs. Now, the Doing Good Index shows us how these resources can be unleashed. It shows us the factors that enable or hinder these private funding flows and what can be done to change that. And this is really what this presentation is about as well, not just to show what Singapore is doing well, but also about what can countries and economies learn from each other? What can governments or what can the different sectors learn from each other in what is working well in some other countries and economies? So the Doing Good Index really looks at, takes a bird's eye view of what is happening in the region. It looks at 17 economies, that's 15 countries plus Hong Kong and Taiwan. We also include a little bit of a special focus on Myanmar, but unfortunately they have not been able to partake in the actual index for the past few years. And we base the index on data that is collected through two mechanisms. One is through survey data. And we survey what we call SDOs, social delivery organizations. Now, I know this is not a very commonly used term, so let me just explain that. We use this term because many of the other terms that are used do not fully apply to the region. So, for example, nonprofit organizations don't quite capture it because a lot of organizations do actually have a for-profit income stream, and there's also social enterprises that we survey. Non-government organization also doesn't quite capture it because many organizations in the region do also are affiliated with government, especially in China and the Congos. And so we use this term SDO, social delivery organizations, which means all nonprofit and for-profit organizations that are working in delivering social needs or services. So we surveyed about 2,000 of these organizations across the region, and then we also consulted with experts, over 140, and they really help us understand really the laws and the facts and the important factual pieces to make sure that we get everything right. And the index looks at 4 sub-indices, 4 areas, and 3 of them relate to government. That's regulations, tax incentives, and government procurement. And government procurement refers to when governments procure goods and services from the social sector. The 4th one, ecosystem, really refers more to the societal embrace of which individuals, communities, and companies value volunteering, giving, and the whole sector as a whole. Each year, we also include a special theme. We send these surveys out to all these organizations with a lot of questions. And we always add a few extra because it's such a good opportunity to take a pulse on certain areas. In 2022, we focused on the impact of COVID. And in 2024, we focused on the impact of digital technology. And I'll talk a little bit more on that and the findings from that later on in the presentation. So this is the index of 2024. As you can see, there are 4 clusters ranging from not doing enough to doing well. There is, in fact, the gold standard of a 5th cluster doing excellent. But to date, no economy has actually scored well enough to make it into that. But who knows, in the future that may happen. And let me just also say that the ranking, this is not a ranking, it's not a league table. The countries and economies are listed in alphabetical order. So when it comes to the three economies that we are looking at, Singapore sits in the top band, doing well, and it has been there since the beginning, since 2018, the first year that we've done this. Hong Kong sits in the doing better cluster and again has sat in that category since 2018. China started off in the doing okay cluster in 2018 and 2020, and then in 2022 we saw it move up to the doing better category where it still sits today. Now let's dive into a little bit more of the actual data. Now I want to start with looking at the funding landscape. I know there's a lot to take in here. I'll talk you through this, and it is also a slide that we may come back to later on, but it helps kind of set the scene of some of the other points that I'll be talking about later. What we're looking at here is the proportion of an SDO budget by funding source, the approximate kind of breakdown. Now, there are some similarities here, but there are also some important differences. What stands out in terms of similarities is that individual funding, and that is funding from individuals, but also from foundations, domestic foundations, is the most important source of funding across all three economies. We also see that foreign funding is not an important source of funding in either of the three economies. But there are also important differences, and one of them is the role of government funding. Now, both Singapore and China, you can see, rely a lot on government funding, but different forms. In Singapore, government grants makes up about 1/3 of an SDO's budget by funding source, whereas in China, this is the government contracts, so procurement contracts, it makes up 30% of their budget. In Hong Kong, government funding is significantly less important and sits much lower, especially procurement contracts. The other thing to point out is corporate funding. This is relatively low across all three economies, and there is really opportunity for that to grow in the future. And I'll talk a bit more about that later on in the slide. Now, let me start at looking a little bit about regulations, one of the sub-indices. Regulations are very important to ensure a kind of enabling environment for organizations to operate. And it refers to the ability and the ease for organizations to establish and then their reporting burden once they're established. As you can see here, there are relatively few clearances required across all three economies to establish, but it can take a very long time in Singapore and especially in Hong Kong. It is the longest time in Hong Kong, although the government has indicated that they are trying to make efforts to make that easier. I would like to point out, though, that as with all data, there are sometimes nuances that are not captured by pure numeric data. And just because only 1 or 2 clearances are required, that doesn't say that much about how easy or difficult that 1 or 2 clearances might be. And I know that in China, even though only 1 clearance is needed, that can at times be quite difficult to obtain. So there is a little bit of a nuance there. Now, another important part is about the number of regulatory bodies that our SDOs have to report to. Having too many of these can add unnecessary reporting burden to SDOs. In China, we see there is only 1, although there's significantly more in Singapore. But again, one other thing to say here, there is a difference between certain types of SDOs and the area where they're working in, and for which these numbers may differ. Now, laws regulating philanthropic activity are really, really important. However, the effectiveness of these laws really depends on how easily accessible they are, or how easy people can understand them and know about them, and the extent to which they are enforced. As you can see, the social sector laws are fairly easy to understand in all three economies. But when it comes to enforcement, there is a little bit more difference. In Singapore, they are seen to be generally enforced, but a little bit less in Hong Kong and in China. A third component of regulations are the ability for SDOs to raise funds, whether it's domestic or foreign. Now, it is, on one hand, it is important for governments to establish accountability and transparency for SDOs and to have some sort of scrutiny on fundraising. But at the same time, this can add undue burden and reporting burden for organizations. So trying to find that balance is definitely a challenge that governments must face. Now, all three economies do have restrictions on domestic fundraising, but this is mostly around online fundraising as well as fundraising in outdoor spaces or public events. And this is not necessarily a bad thing because, as I said, these restrictions can help build kind of accountability and transparency to the sector. In China, we also see restrictions being in place for receiving foreign funding and for sending money abroad. As we saw, well, actually, the funding piece showed that funding from individuals is the most important source of funding. One way to incentivize more giving are tax incentives. These are very strong incentivizing tools that are available to governments. Why? Well, on one hand, because they put money back in the pockets of donors, and who wouldn't want that? You donate, but you also get a financial benefit. But at the same time, they also have a very strong signaling effect, and that matters, especially in Asia, where governments loom large and donors, whether they are philanthropists, business leaders, or companies, do tend to kind of take notice of what the government has to say. And tax incentives give a strong signaling effect. They indicate that they are supportive of the social sector and they want you to donate to these organizations. Now, Singapore really stands out here. It has a tax incentive rate of 250% without any limit. That means that for every $1 that you donate, you can deduct $2.50 from your taxable income. And Singapore, together with Vietnam, are the only economies that do not place a limit on the income or profit that is available for these incentives. Hong Kong and China, they do have a rate of 100%, but as I said, they limit the amount that you can deduct it. So only up to 30% of your income or your profit in the case of a company. Now, as with laws, the incentivizing effect can be limited by the difficulty in understanding or accessing these incentives. And we asked the SDOs how easy it is for individuals to claim tax incentives. And as you can see, this is considered very easy in Hong Kong. And for those of you listening from Hong Kong, you'll know that this process is a click in the button and it's done. But it's significantly more difficult in China. So those are just areas where the process can be made easier to help incentivize this. Now, let's talk a bit more about working with government. As I mentioned, governments in Asia loom large and they play a strong role. People tend to work alongside government rather than trying to go against the grain. But what role does the government play when it comes to the social sector? Well, it has different roles it can play. One is it can provide very much needed funding. When we ask, or in the survey, we ask what SDOs would like to see most from governments. And their top two answers in all three economies were either funding or procuring from their organizations. So funding really is what SDOs are seeking from government. Now, funding, as I mentioned, can come in the form of grants or through procurement contracts. Grants play a very important role in Singapore. As you can see, 83% of SDOs receive some form of government grant, and this makes up approximately 30% of their budget. This is the highest in Asia. And Information about these opportunities are also quite easy to access, which is also a contributing factor to why this is and plays such an important role there. And as you can see, it's a lot less easy in China and Hong Kong to get access to information about these opportunities. For procurement, this is where China really stands out. 73% of SDOs receive income from procurement contracts, and this makes up about a third of their budget. But here, even though it is so common, the SDOs do say that it's quite difficult to get information about opportunities available to them, especially in China. So that is a bit of a, not sure if it's contradictory, but it is interesting that although it plays such an interesting role, SDOs, or important role, SDOs do say that it's difficult to get information about them. Now, one thing that can really help facilitate this process for procurement is by having a central platform where opportunities can be advertised or accessed. Singapore and China do have this, but Hong Kong does not. Beyond funding, there are other ways in which the government can support the social sector. As I mentioned, signaling is an important part of it. One way is, for example, by having a national giving day or a giving week. Both Singapore and China have these, and they generate a lot of funding that goes to the sector. They raise a lot of awareness, and it can be a really important signaling effect if the government is supportive or endorses this event. Hong Kong at this stage does not have such a kind of economy-wide event. Another thing that we often see is that the countries that and economies that tend to do well on the Doing Good Index are those where the government really listens to the social sector organizations and values their inputs and sees them as valued partners. And this is to some extent reflected in the extent of which there is collaboration and consultation with SDOs. And promisingly, in Singapore and in China, approximately 3/4 of SDOs say that they are regularly involved in policy consultations with government. In Hong Kong, there is some more room for improvement there. Now, for corporate engagement, there is, as I said, when it comes to funding, there is clearly room to grow. It makes up a relatively small portion, although quite a few organizations receive corporate funding, as you can see on the left-hand side, Singapore and Hong Kong are around the 60%, a little bit less in China, but it actually makes up a small percent of their budget, only 10%. So the amount and volume of funding that they're giving can likely be a lot higher. But there are other ways in which companies can provide much needed support beyond just funding. They can provide in-kind support by donating computers or office space or other ways, but they can also provide much needed manpower through volunteers. And this is where we see much higher engagement, especially in China. There is significant corporate volunteering happening with social sector organizations. And finally, companies can also provide skills. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the talent challenge and the technology challenge. But skills, most SDOs don't have the resources to hire specific dedicated staff for things like IT, sometimes even for things like accounting. And this is where companies can lend that time of their own staff to support SDOs. As I mentioned, the talent challenge, Peter also already mentioned this in his introduction. It really is a challenge across the region. SDOs need good people to do good work, but getting those good people and then actually keeping them is really difficult. We ask our SDOs about this, and as you can see, especially in Hong Kong, SDOs find it very difficult to recruit staff. Why is this the case? Well, a contributing factor to this is this persistent perception that SDO staff should earn less than for-profit staff. while competitive salaries and bonuses are the norm in the corporate world, they're frowned upon in the social sector. And there have been many news articles about high bonuses being paid out to senior leadership of SDOs. But sometimes really that is needed in order for organizations to improve and make sure that they do the right work. And as you see, that perception of that payment perception is particularly high across all three economies. But actually, SDOs, or for people that work in the social sector, they get penalized twice. Not only do they basically have to accept a lower pay, there's also a lack of opportunities for internal capacity building. The organizations do not have the operational funding to invest in their own staff, to build their capacity, and to have opportunities for growth. So there is a real need to focus and to make sure that donors recognize this as well, that they really need to support organizations to build their staff. And for that, there's capacity building support is needed, operational funding, but SDOs say that they find it very difficult to secure unrestricted funding. This is pretty much equal in all economies, and rarely do they receive donor support for capacity building. Donors tend to prefer to give project support, program support, or earmark support, and that does not include support for capacity building. Now, before I finish, I want to just talk very briefly about our theme for this year, which was around technology. Now, Asia is at the center of the technological expansion, and it has half of the world's internet users. And during the pandemic, most organizations, if they weren't already online, they were forced online. And it really accelerated that digitization trend. But that has continued even post-COVID. And as you can see on the left-hand side, the majority of SDOs have indicated that they are intending to increase the use of digital technology in the next 2 years. And this is across many different areas, across program delivery, monitoring and evaluation, stakeholder engagement, but also fundraising. Now, we asked specifically around crowdfunding, and while there are a large number of SDOs that are already crowdfunding, but in fact, a lot more intend to do it. So you can see that there's a certain amount that is already doing it, but a significantly higher amount is intending to start crowdfunding in the future, which is great. However, there is a little bit of caution here because there is a challenge that lies here, that our findings show that SDOs are insufficiently prepared for the technological kind of future and the challenges that come with this. And one of these challenges is the cybersecurity threat. The World Economic Forum has said that Asia Pacific is now the new ground zero for cyber crimes, and that is also affecting SDOs. And we asked how many SDOs had been subject to a cyber attack, and although that percentage isn't that high, it is concerning that the majority of organizations have very little protection in place to protect themselves in the case that happens. And so what can be done? We asked what SDOs really need to help them adopt more digital technology and digital awareness. Funding, it's back to the same thing. SDOs need money, they don't have the skills, and they lack awareness. And this is where donors can really play an important role. And I think this is especially where corporate donors can play an important role. Funding, of course, and then especially operational funding that allows SDOs to make the necessary investments into these technological tools, but also by providing in-kind support, computers, software, hardware, or providing skills to train the staff accordingly. Now, that brings me to the end of my slide. I just want to quickly point out that we have something called our microsite. A link will be included at the end of the presentation, where you can learn a lot more about the DGI and about our data, because I've only been able to share just a few things here, but we have so much more information on this microsite. You can compare data look at data for each economy in itself, but you can also on our what we call the data dashboard compare information across economies, but also across time, look at how Singapore has improved over the years. So if you're curious about more data, I do encourage you to take a look here and learn more. And if you have any questions about any of the data or anything that I've shared, I'm sure will come up in the next sessions, or please drop in a question and I'm happy to answer them later. You can also follow us on all of our socials or download the report through the QR code. I will also share that in the chat later, the link, in case you'd like to, you don't have time to scan it here. With that, I will hand over back to Faiz or Peter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anilot. Thanks for the insightful sharing on the Doing Good Index 2024 across the 3 economies. I think it's definitely give us a broader appreciation of the philanthropy landscape of each economy. So now we'll like to invite Mr. Peter Yang to share some further insights or highlights on the philanthropy landscape in Singapore. Mr. Peter, please.
Thanks, Anilot. I think that you have done the heavy lifting to share all the data. And I think, given this is a Singapore launch for the Doing Good Index, I thought I can just add some color, share some of our perspective, learning, comparing the Doing Good Index results from 2024 to 2022. And, as a practitioner on the ground, and share what are some of the things happening in Singapore. I was just reflecting, over the past 2 days to say that if I would use one word to share the past 2 years, Singapore's ecosystem growth, and I would use the word exciting, right? So over my entire, journey in the social sector, I've never find things been so exciting as the past couple of years. Here are some of them, right? And we mentioned about, funding landscape is really, really important, right? So that's really something that drives the behavior of many of our SDO partners. And in Singapore, I personally find that the funding landscape is keep evolving, right? So, I mean, one of the things that we started to see is that, there are gradual reduction in corporate donation, right? We see more corporates are participating in giving, but based on the MEPC's National Giving Survey, right? So the median donation are reducing. And we also know, government grants in certain area will gradually reduce, right? So that's kind of one movement, moving organization to be more competitive in terms of, articulating their value proposition in seeking the grants. On the other side, the great news is really there are over the past maybe 5 years, Singapore have seen tenfold growth of family offices or high net worth individuals, come to Singapore and relocate or setting Singapore as their home, and that brings their philanthropy donation as well, right? So we have seen a huge amount of increase from the high net worth individuals, whether it's local or foreigners, to make the big donations. And according to the latest survey, right, so 2024 versus 2022, the top Singapore 100 donors has donated almost double more the amount in their personal donations. And apart from that, we also see a lot of interesting trends about rising pooled funds, right, and donor advised funds, where individuals, given to third party to part their money with more professional intermediaries to manage their money, right? So that's on the rise of the private donor side. And then another interesting thing we have to keep hearing in the sector is about growing interest in finding innovative financing mechanisms, right? So some of you may have heard, about pay for success, right? So not funding for activities, but really using a little bit like a commercial mechanism, right? So you only pay when you pay more when the project is successful, right? And then I think this in the sector we have seen a lot of collective impact scheme, and recently the most interesting thing I have learned the last year is some of the ecosystem partners are piloting trading of outcomes, right? So you may have heard in the commercial sector we have trading of carbon credits and etc. And I think the innovative way of looking in the future is that when charities generate outcome, right? So can we commercialize it, and can we trade these outcomes as a new mechanism for funding? Right. So with all the changing and evolving landscape, I would say, different type of donors, whether it's corporate, whether it's government, whether it's individuals, their motivation are different, right? And the ways to engage them are really different. So the question is really for the SDOs. It's about how can we organize a bit differently to tap on these trends, right? So that's on the funding landscape. And I would say, today we have many people from the corporate side, right? So looking at the giving as the first step. And I would say that just imagine the social sector, funding landscape is like you are investing, right? So, but what are you investing? You are investing in the social sector for the social impact, right? So I think across Asia or in all the sort of economies, we have seen that traditionally we are really investing, and in return we are getting outputs, right? In terms of, for example, if you are giving a scholarship for 100 kids, right? So what you are getting is really 100 kids as the output, right? But as the landscape evolve, I think there's a significant shift to say, apart from the 100 head count, what is the change, right? What is the impact that my money is doing? So there's a lot more ask from the investor or from the funder to demand to understand more about the impact that their money is achieving. Right. Just in Singapore, I personally find that this shift toward from output to outcome is really changing very fast. The Ministry of Finance, I think, have stepped up and asking our government agencies to for themselves to report outcomes, and we have seen, different government ministries and doing capacity building for their own staff in order to meet the shift from output to outcome, right? And we also see, the leading government funders for the social sector rolling out their own impact measurement framework, right? So Tote Board, National Council for Social Services, each have their own impact measurement and guiding their grantees to be able to report on these. And on the corporate side, the corporate funders is also not immune to this drive because of the rise of ESG. I think many of them are also asking their grantees or their charity partners to let them know about the impact that their dollars are making, and hence they becomes an equal important driver for outcome. And last but not least, when I talked about some of the innovation happening in the financing space, and all these structures are largely rely upon better defining outcomes and better reporting of the outcomes, right? So as you can see on the funder side, right? So all of the funders are very much would like to see the change, but on the other hand, whether the SDOs are ready for this change, right? I would say that these 3 points are come from a recent survey that we have done over 100 over organizations, and also some of the focus groups, right? So these are some of the key challenges that the SDOs are facing, right? Most importantly, I think some of the SDO find that there are, as the sector is moving, there are multiple funders having their own impact measurement system, right? And sometimes when the SDOs get money from both, even on the same program, they find it could be confusing that they have, even for the same programs, they have to use the 2 different impact measurement system to measure the same programs, right? And that cause a lot of additional work for the grantees in managing their funders. The other piece is about capacity building, right? So when the shift, from measuring just counting the numbers to really articulating what is the ROI, right? What is the outcome? I think it takes times to build the capacity and the capability within the organization and individuals. And I also feel that there is really a lacking of specific technology that can assist the organization to efficiently tracking of these, then all these capacity building and technologies really require some further investment from the funders as well as the SDO themselves. And last but not least, I think in our surveys, it's really surprising. I think some of the SDO feel that for mature programs, they are very willing to invest time to better articulate and report the impact, and sometimes it's also for their own learning purpose. But they find when on new programs, when programs are not mature, they feel there is an additional pressure, right, to track and report impact, and sometimes even fear of what if the number is not great, the impact is not great? Would there be any implications on the funding? So, that's on the outcome side, and then the next perspective, as an analog shared, manpower is really a huge challenge across the region, right? So Singapore is not immune to that. But I just want to share, I feel in the social sector in Singapore, I think we are very lucky. I think there is a lot of different approaches from the government, from the SDO themselves, and trying to using a multi-pronged approach to addressing this challenge, right? So one of the key pieces, we keep seeing government leading the professionalization of key job families, right? Whether it is, those very challenging. I think Singapore started and doing very well in the social workers and etc. those category, but now it has moved to a job role such as community nurses, which is really harder to attract and keep, right? And then for special needs teachers, right? So that's they are sort of not only have to teach but also to do caregivers for the special needs children as well. So I think government has really stepped up, looking at professionalize these job families, providing additional pay and benefits, right? Rebrand these career pathways, and to a certain extent, right? So to redesign jobs to free them from some of the administrative tasks and to better focus on care or professional service delivery. So that's one stream that's happening, and the other stream I personally find it's going to happen more is really about using technologies to reduce heavy manpower required areas, right? So there are certain technology that's very, very helpful in the operations, right? Just the example I often like to use, when I was doing care, giving for my grandfather, to lift him up, to take him to shower, it takes two of us, and it's really challenging. And this is really happening in all the nursing homes on the day-to-day, right? So imagine you just need a two-person doing the task of bathing, right? Whereas with technology, with certain innovative technology, this manpower can be reduced to sometimes one person, or even half of the, or even 25% of the amount of previously you have to do. And with technology, it's also reduced the risk about injuring yourself and etc. So there are a lot of technology being explored in the operational side, and also there is back-end technology with AI, with sector specific technology to help reducing or improving the efficiency of the organization management. And last but not least, I think and Lotte also mentioned about volunteering is indeed a very good resource to augment manpower. However, I would say, even though volunteers are free, but managing volunteer does take a lot of effort and skills. And I often champion that, volunteers are not free, because you have to, I mean, even though they don't charge a salary, but their motivations are very different from the full-time staff. And you really need to have a really great, system and process in tabbing or maximizing volunteers' benefits, right? And I really feel Singapore has spent a significant amount in doing this. You know, the last couple of years, I think NCS has been leading on looking at not only, you know, service-based volunteer, but also on looking at skill-based volunteer, tapping on corporate skills to build organization capability. And you know, we have a huge amount of tools, capacity building sessions, and the networks and etc. You know, as a VM practitioner, I can safely say, scanning around the world, I mean, Singapore probably is the most matured or more heavily invested in VM capability building, and this is something that I really would like to see Singapore play a role in sharing these resources across. So with this kind of three trends on funding, outcome, and manpower, right? So just imagine, right? So if you are CEO of a charity, what is your daily life like? Right. This is how I picture as a capacity builder, how I talk to the nonprofit leaders, and I feel that, you know, every day they are spinning the different plates with multiple challenges, as I mentioned. Um, so hence, you know, I feel as a capacity builder or a sector sort of advocate, I feel that maybe Singapore is a bit more advanced than some of the other economy when government is really providing a lot of funding, you know, especially capacity building funding or sort of in a way a type of form of unrestricted funding using in capacity building, right? So we have really done very well in helping the organization to have resources to tap on technology, to look at the strategy, to look at the talent, right? So, you know, one of the example I give to the overseas friends is like in Singapore, you know, some of the charity can potentially get, okay, convert into RMB is about 3 million or Hong Kong dollars, 3.5 million Hong Kong dollars is just utilize those money to buy technology or implement technology. And then these are not small amount of money that charity could use, you know, in helping to upscale themselves. And apart from this, I think that, you know, there's a lot of growth of philanthropic intermediaries in the likes of AVPN Community Foundation, the newly set up Asian Community Foundation, Temasek Trust Ecosystem, and all the stuff, right? And these are, I feel, a great support to some of the charity in bridging the SDOs to the individual donors, right? To help them to capture a different type of funds so that they can achieve more financial sustainability. And last but not least, I think, which something I'm personally very glad is about, we have seen the learning community forming in the subsectors in Singapore, yeah, whether it is in mental health space, whether it is in person with disability space, and I see the learning and networking is happening, and I really feel that this learning communication will foster better collaboration and sharing of the knowledge, right? So this is something that has already been done. I think that could be a good reference for other countries. And then what more can we do? And personally, you know, I feel that there is a lot of money available to buy solutions, right, and to cater for the change. But I think we also equally need to assist the SDOs to be able to manage that change, right? So invest in change management, which is something that I don't see quite many of the funding schemes provide. And the other piece, I feel that there is a lot of technology, especially commercial technology, has been offered to the social sector, and we tried to contextualize many of this technology. But I feel that with the rise of AI and etc., we need a lot more contextualized solution for the social sector in the likes of donor management, volunteer management, you know, case management, and etc. And these are very sector specific, and I think having these contextualized the technology will help save a lot of the effort by individual organization to do so. And last but not least, you know, I feel that across Asia, many of the cities face similar challenges with mental health, with the PWDs, and etc. I think we could having more platform like this to share and cross collaborate. And last but not least, I think, you know, in order for collaboration to happen, we need capacity builders, we need facilitators who are familiar with the sector, to grow, just like the intermediaries for funders, we need capacity builders. Okay, selling for ourselves to make this work, make collaboration first. Yeah, so these are some of the points that I would just like to share as a Singapore update. Thanks, back to you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for sharing the highlights from Singapore. I'm sure we'll keep that in mind as we transit to the regional conversations we have with our esteemed panelists. Today on our panel, we have Dr. Lan Yusin, Associate Professor from Tsinghua University's School of Public Policy and Management, Vice Dean of the Tsinghua Institute for Philanthropy and Chief Editor of China Nonprofit Review. We also have Ms. Viveka Seong, CEO of Asian Charity Services, ACS, a non-profit organization based in Hong Kong that provides capacity building, strategic consulting, and community engagement services to social impact organizations. So we will have Mr. Peter Yang to moderate this session. However, before I hand over to Mr. Peter Yang to moderate the session, a gentle reminder to all members of the audience that you may use the Zoom chat to ask questions to the panelists. Handing over to Mr. Peter Yang, please.
Thanks, Vice. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lan, and thanks, Viveka, for joining us. I know you are partners, for CAPS in the DJI study as well in your respective regions, right? So thank you for joining us and sharing your insights into this first trial about, a cross-territory learning session, right? Maybe before we go into the details, I would just like you to, maybe have a brief introduction of yourself and then the organization that you represent. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for having me here. I still feel successful because of the language, but I will try my best. Okay. Well, a very brief introduction of myself and my institute. So IPTU actually was established in
Dr. Lan, I think you are on your side. It's a little bit choppy. I'm not sure whether the rest can hear you.
To Ministry of Civil Affairs and the Tsinghua. Let me say. All right.
Yeah, now it's okay. Yeah, just now I think the connection was a little bit choppy. Yeah, we didn't hear maybe the back 30 seconds of your introduction. Yeah.
Okay. Can I start again?
Yeah, sure. Maybe you try again. Yeah, if not, if it's not, I will let you know. Yeah.
Okay. So IPTU was established jointly by the Ministry of Civil Affairs and Tsinghua University in 2015. But this institute has a relatively long history, dating back to 26 years ago. That is the Angel Research Center, established in 1998 by Professor Wang Ming. So it is actually the first or the earliest Angel Research Institute in China. So from the and this institute is based on the School of Public Policy and Management, and also supported by the School of Finance. So from the change of the name of this institute, we can see that in the past years, actually, in the past, our focus is mainly from the organizational perspective, but now, especially from 3 years ago, we are shifting our concerns to the topic or to the perspective of donors or funders. So this days we are actually working on a new initiative. We name it Wealth for Well-being. We have a name W Square initiative actually, which is comprised of action learning and action research, aiming to influence the wealthy people and the corporates in China. So that is one of the most important thing we are doing now. And the second thing, actually, these days we are working on a new annual report, quite similar to Giving USA. It is Giving China. We are trying to do some work about the large landscape of the giving in China to incorporate different data and statistics to have this new report. So that is the second important thing we are doing these days. Okay, that's my brief introduction.
Thank you, Dr. Lan. Yeah, for audience, in case you don't know, I think Dr. Lan's institute is Tsinghua University, right? I think one of the best university in China in that regard. Yeah, so I always wanted to go, but I didn't have the chance to go. So really, yeah, I would say that you know, you guys are really the prestige sort of brand in China in terms of academic research. Okay, thanks, Dr. Lan. Viveka, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. First of all, such an honor to be on this panel. I'm really looking forward to the discussion with you and Dr. Lan on this topic. My name is Viveka. Like Peter, I'm originally from Mainland China. I moved to Hong Kong in 2009 to pursue my passion for the nonprofit sector. So I've worked on the nonprofit sector, the nonprofit side of the spectrum, but also I had experiences about 8 years working with an international grant makers on the foundation side. Now I'm with Asian Charity Services, ACS. In a way, it's very similar to Empact. We are an intermediary, a capacity builder with a mission to support NGOs in Hong Kong, particularly those small to medium-sized NGOs, to maximize their social impact. And we do so through 3 main services, as Faz mentioned just now. Capacity building, that's our typical training activities, workshops, seminars like this. We also do strategic consulting, which I believe ACES is one of the first and very few organizations that offer strategy consulting to nonprofit organizations in Hong Kong. And last but not least, we also offer community engagement services, trying to bring and convene ecosystem stakeholders together, not just a nonprofit, but also corporate funders to come together, have conversations like this to build that ecosystem. Very honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Viveka. So I had the opportunity, you know, just to share a little bit of the context in Singapore, right? So how the Singapore social sector or philanthropic sector has been developing over the, you know, last couple of years. You know, maybe since you guys are also doing the same study in your respective area, right? So maybe I just turn to you guys, you know, since the last DGI 2022, you know, what are the key developments of the social sector in your respective market?
Well, me first?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So actually, I've learned from Peter the case in Singapore, and I think we actually share some similarity of the things. For example, the new technology adoption, and also from output to impact. Yes, there are more and more people are talking about impact, and the donors are learning. They are learning. They are always trying to have new way of giving. Yeah, so that that is a trend for also in China. And here I have actually listed the five other trends I think is in the past 2 years in mainland China. Well, the first one is the amendment of the charity law in China and the coming of the era of strong regulation. Yeah, so there are several things which have resulted in this outcome, right? The first thing actually is scandals, especially in 2023. There is a foundation they have fundraising fraud and misappropriation scandal. So this foundation, has a very a big impact. We always compare this one to Guo Meimei affairs in 2011. So it has a very bad impact, actually, I think that way. And also, because of the economic downturn, and this change of the economic environment has bring in some new speculators and illegal activities into this philanthropy area. That means someone in the other affairs enter this this domain, and so they have a very negative impact for we can see the industry of philanthropy credibility, and actually because of them, the government has strengthened the regulation, and this can cause burdens for other good ones, right? So that is the first thing. The second trend, yes, it is also because of the economic downturn and the contraction of government spending or grants. So yeah, some social delivery organizations, especially those social service providers, are facing challenge of their resources. So that is the second one. Yeah, and some of them disappeared actually in the past years. And the third trend is a good one. It is the rapid development.
Sorry, I think we can't hear you. Just when you are announcing the good news, then we lost the good news.
Of community philanthropy.
Okay, now we can.
For the
Now you're back,
background,
yeah.
the good news is the rapid development of community. Okay, now. So it is a rapid development of community philanthropy or community charity, because of the central government policy emphasize on local development and community governance. So in the past 2 years, community philanthropy is a hot topic in China, and there are more and more community foundations or community fund, and the local government is very passionate about it. So that is a good news. So for the fourth trend, dating from 2021, because of the Commonwealth policy and the third distribution. This is a discourse in China, right? Because of that, more and more corporates and the rich people are concerned about philanthropy. Surely, they have those kind of needs because of the accumulation of wealth, and the first generation of enterprise leaders are getting more older and older. They are trying to think a new way of the use of wealth. So and also how to the legacy, right? So some more and more actually. For example, the family office where those financial or wealth management organizations were those new players are entering the philanthropy domain, and they are eager to learn how to carry out how to do things, right? So that is a very the second good news, right? The second opportunity, and the fifth trend is is a development, the further development of online philanthropy and digital philanthropy. That is very common. That is similar to what is happening in Singapore, I think. Okay, that's my 5 cents.
Yeah, Dr. Yeah, thank you so much. I think, for audience, for especially for Singapore ones, if you ever wonder how, when Dr. Lan shared that, the increase in sort of regulation and etc., I can just give you an example. I visited one of the charity in Shanghai, and they told me that each year they will have to go under 23 audit because of different fundraising they are conducting. And can you imagine, and charity goes through 23 audits, and they hired 2 people just to deal with auditor as a full-time job. And that's how serious the regulation is in terms of public fundraising and, finding different means of just raise funds. And I really find that it's a very challenging environment. And I think many of the charity, as I met, especially in Shanghai, they have cut their staff strengths minimum by 1/3. Many of them, like Dr. Lan said, they may not even exist, because of the economic downturn and the restriction. And hence, when we set up, and people told me that don't set up a nonprofit in China, do it as a social enterprise, and that showed how prevalent, how challenging it is at this moment for the social sector on the regulation side, right? So. Okay, Viveka, maybe over to you.
Sure. Well, I've been taking a lot of notes as both of you speak. The funding landscape, I would say, is very similar. And both of you mentioned about the growing interest among the wealthy population, right? There's a lot of philanthropic capital flowing into the social sector, and the region actually is getting wealthy. So that's overall very good news. There are 2 things I'd like to highlight on in terms of key developments in the social sector in Hong Kong. One is on sustainability. It's both sides, both for a nonprofit organization, but also for the funders. You see funders showing more interest in investing in nonprofit organizations that demonstrate sustainability in the programs, but also in their organization. On the other side of the spectrum, you see nonprofit organizations looking for more sustainable ways of surviving, right? For example, in Hong Kong, one of the challenges we face as a nonprofit is that usually the grants is short-term based. 2 to 3 years, 1 year, or sometimes one-off. So that is challenging for a lot of the NGOs to look for the long-term growth of the organization. But sustainability actually comes twofold. One is sustainable models, whether nonprofit organizations can generate revenue themselves, or they can scale the programs, so a larger funder can take up their existing programs or projects. The other side of the sustainability, I think that also relates to what Peter and also Dr. Lam mentioned about is in terms of impact or impact measurement. That's our favorite topic among the social sector, I believe. There are different schools of thinking, right? How do you measure impact? What is impact? There is a more quantitative side of more data-driven impact measurement. There are also many funders in Hong Kong who understands the challenges of the nonprofit, who take a different approach looking at, not just the data, the numbers, but also the storytelling part, the qualitative side of the impact measurement. I think there's merits in both. It really boils down to what exactly this NGO, this type of work is, and how, as a funder, you can best support those NGOs. There's also discussion among the funders, but also among the NGOs, the nonprofit organizations, in terms of alignment of impact measurement. Particularly, a lot of the organizations work in very similar themes. For example, education, youth, mental health are some of the biggest themes in Hong Kong. And as a funder, but also as an NGO, how do you come up with similar kind of metrics, KPIs, so that we can compare, not to say apples to the apples, but at least that, you can be more visible in terms of your impact, and so that you're not work individually as an organization or as a funder, but how do you build that ecosystem of looking at impact in a more powerful way. The second trend that I'd like to mention is on the operational funding. Some of you may have watched this video called Make a Difference. It's been going viral, not just in Hong Kong, but regionally as well. So the idea is really to highlight the importance of operational funding for nonprofit organizations. Think about yourself as a customer going to a bakery to buy a bread, croissant or chocolate bread. It's very visual for you to see that the money you pay goes to the ingredients, whether it's flour, water, sugar, chocolate. But it's harder for funders to realize that it's equally or even more important to invest in those behind the scenes ingredients. So for example, the chef's salary, the rent, electricity, right? So similarly, in the nonprofit sector, there's a lot more awareness, I would say, among the funder side, but also a lot more demand, a lot more interest among the nonprofit side to ask for those operational funding that really helps NGOs build that strong foundation for success. And then to me, I would add on to that, it's not just operational expenses to cover the day-to-day ordinary expenses, but I'd like to urge the funders, those of you in the audience, to think, a step or two steps further on looking at how you can support NGOs in terms of strategic growth funding. So for example, in the Hong Kong DGI Doing Good Index report launch in December that we hosted last year, there's a session where we talk about technology, which oftentimes is part of that operational funding. But beyond just investing as a funder or donor, investing in laptops or at the more operational level, CRM softwares, can we also help NGOs look beyond that at a more transformative level, building digital process, building that strategy within the organization. If you see the numbers in Hong Kong, I believe it's more than 60%, almost 70% of the nonprofit that does not have a strategy for digital implementations. My last point, I'm going to end there, is when you look at operational funding or strategic growth funding, an important element is trust. There's a whole discussion about trust-based philanthropy these days. To me, trust-based philanthropy is actually not a choice. It's a must, because as a funder, you have to rely on the on-the-ground knowledge of a lot of those nonprofit organizations and trusting that they know their work the best. I worked with a grant-making organization for about 8 years, and our mission was university capacity building across Asia. And I still remember working with universities in Myanmar. I don't speak the language, I don't know the culture, I don't know the regulations. So we really have to build that relationship with our colleagues in Myanmar who are working inside the university system over there, and trust that they can deliver that work. And then the other point is that I feel funders, donors have a very important role to play to push the boundaries of the NGOs. Instead of just covering the operations funding expenses or some of those strategic growth funding, but think even beyond is how can you utilize this grant making process to help NGOs grow. So that is very much related to what, Peter, you mentioned a few times in your presentation on the capacity of the organization. So it's not just giving a grant for the NGOs to fulfill that project KPIs, but for the long run, for this NGO to also grow into something or dream bigger, dream, a larger dream to solve bigger problems in the society. I'll end it there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Viveka. I think we have 20 more minutes, and I would encourage some of the audience to ask your questions. Right, I will get going a bit more, and would love to address some of the audience questions as well. Right, so maybe we talk a little bit about the sort of our individual territory, right? What's going on, right? So I would like to kind of maybe switch the conversation a little bit, talking about cross-border opportunities, right? So personally, in the last maybe 6 months, every month I will have 2 or 3 conversation. People ask me, "Hey, I want to set up." I mean, my Chinese friends or contacts will say, "I want to set up a nonprofit in Singapore, right? What should I do? What is the tax regulation is like, and then etc." That's partially the reason why we are having this conversation, so some of my friends could get more information from all of you. But I just want to tap on this trend about, from local to a little bit of maybe cross territory, cross country, cross border kind of philanthropy or ecosystem collaboration, right? So with that, maybe my first question is to Dr. Lan. I mean, this is a lot of time that my friends in Singapore or my clients are in Singapore are asking me, right? So a lot of the regional foundations or funders are very interested into China, but they find it's a little bit harder to navigate with the new 十三法, right? The new laws, and then some of the restrictions about foreign fundings, as what we see, case studies are, right? So do you have any advice for organizations or funders who are very interested, to potentially support China's, community? Do you have any advice for them?
Right. Yeah. So just as what Emily Lot have just showed, there are restrictions for the cross-border philanthropy, especially in China. Well, in the first section, I've said some challenges in China, right? But don't be too pessimistic about the future of this sector in China. I think because of actually China government or China regulation is always responsive. Because of this scandal, things they are contracting, right? But I think after a while, maybe in the future, maybe the environment will be better. So I think the conclusion of doing better by DJI is proper for China. So for this question, I'd like to say, well, let me check. Maybe there are. I want to have 4 points for advices for you guys. Well, the first one actually. The first one actually is to, if you want to do things in China, don't be afraid of those regulations or government interference. I think don't try to avoid the connection with government, just to embrace the regulation of government. I think that is very important. You have to do that, and so I think on this point, so you have, if you want to do good things in China, firstly you have to embrace, to know the policy priorities. That means, for example, these days the community development is very important in China, right? So, the environment, or the regulating environment, or the resources will be good in this specific topic, right? So the first, you have to choose the right topic and the right area for you to do your work. This is the first one, and the second one is avoid investment in some sensitive topic and sensitive areas. For example, don't engage in politics-related things, or religious-related or human rights-related activities. And I think China, where people in China have different value or view about these things. For example, human rights, right? So this is the second point. So based on these two advices, I think foreign investment or foreign philanthropic donations are welcome in China. So this go to the third advices. Third advice, that is to try your best to understand the key regulation and government procedures. Actually, there are not only one regulating bodies in China, as the DJI report have showed. Actually, for foreign philanthropy resources, there are at least three governing body, I think. And the first one actually is the let me check. Actually, it is the bank, right? It is about the money, the transfer of money. You have to you have to transfer the money to China, right? So there are regulations about that. And the second one, actually, if you want to transfer your money into China, you have to get the approval from the PSB. That is how to say, the Public Security Bureau, right? So, but don't be afraid of PSB. Actually, they are very helpful. They are always trying to help you to achieve your service in China. Then, actually, if you want to get the approval from PSB, you have to get the approval from the a unit. We call it the business supervisory unit, where the governing body of this specific topic, right? In China, for example, if you are your activity is about education, so the Ministry of Education should be the business supervisory unit here. So if you want to get the approval from PSB, you have to get the approval from this BSU first. So and in the actual process, the role played by BSU is the most critical. That means if you have got the approval from the get approval from PSB usually, and then you can transfer your money into China. So the key, critical one is the business supervisory unit. So you have to make clear which one is the critical one. So that is the whole process. And actually, because you have two ways as a charity organization, you have two ways to get into China. The first one is to set up your own branch office in China, and the second one is to register for temporary activities. So you have to choose one of the two options based on your strategy and the amount of money you want to use in China, right? Usually, most of the organizations will choose the second one, the temporary activity registration. For this one, it is very important to find a proper partner in China. That means an NPO partner or a foundation as a partner. There are some organizations who are very good at registration or registration of temporary activities. There are some. So if some of you are interested in this, we can talk later, and you may find some to help you with that. Okay. So this is the third or the fourth, right? Okay. Let me check. All right. I think that's all. If I come up with anything else, I will talk to you later. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Lan. I think for the audience, I think the key takeaway I feel is that that's definitely, it's not a no, right? So there is definitely possibility, right? It depends on some of the intricate point that Dr. Lan has mentioned. And I think, if you really want to find a bit more, I think you can ask for Dr. Lan's contact. I'm sure that he will be happy to share a bit more with you guys. Okay, thank you. And I think maybe I move to Viveka. I think that Weeping has a question for you in the chat. Would like you to address that.
I'll just read out the question in case other participants, audience may not have seen that. So the question is that comparatively speaking, individual donations is the largest funding source in Hong Kong compared to Singapore and China. Is this undesired outcome or a result of reduction in government funding over the years? If this is a desired outcome of philanthropic development, please share the good practice. It's a very good question. Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to iterate what Analotti mentioned about. There's nuances and intricacies in the data. When we did the survey, given the network of ACS, most of the NGOs, nonprofit organizations that filled out our survey are smaller to medium-sized nonprofit in Hong Kong. There are a handful of larger NGOs, mostly subvented NGOs. So the funding sources will be different if you look at the different size or nature of the NGOs. So larger in Hong Kong, larger NGOs, subvented NGOs usually get their main funding source from the government. These are usually organizations that work at the forefront of delivering social services, whereas the majority of the nonprofit in Hong Kong are smaller size with very limited access to government funding. So that's one clarification I'd like to make. The numbers you see in the way do reflect the fact that there's a very vibrant philanthropic community here in Hong Kong, be it private funders, foundations, or individual donors. We talked just now about the growing wealth, right, in the region. I think in Hong Kong is also the case. There's a little bit of a healthy competition between Singapore and Hong Kong on becoming the next regional hub, philanthropic hub in the region. So you see a lot of developments in that as well. I would say there's a big culture of giving in Hong Kong. If you look at the data, not just in terms of the funding going to supporting domestic NGOs, there's actually, I would say about 50% of the funding going outflow to support cross-border giving activities, projects outside of Hong Kong. So has always been a culture of providing philanthropic giving. I think the difference is that, for individual donors or private foundations, one of the advantages is that those philanthropic capital can be actually more risk-taking, more innovative, sometimes more emotional as well as more personal, right? That they can actually fund and invest in areas whereas it's probably not the government priorities. So for example, just give an example, arts and culture may not be the top priority for the government here. There is funding going to those activities and projects, but not as compared to elderly services, youth, or mental well-being. So there's a lot of a potential for those private funders coming in to support these areas, and it can, relate to a lot of the personal interests in arts and culture as well. The other area I would like to emphasize, given capacity building is my passion, that's another area I feel there is a huge potential for private funders, individual donors to come in to support, looking at more long-term, more sustainable, more systemic change in capacity building for the sector. I hope that I answered that question. Peter, do you have anything to add?
No, I think for me, it was just really about seeing, I think Analotti has something to add. I feel this is something that Hong Kong really does well, right? With less government funding, the individual and the community really is one of the key source of funding. And that's something that, I personally also would love to learn, and, how Hong Kong does that without even having a that national giving kind of campaign like China, the 九九公益日, which is really big and driving the numbers, right? That Hong Kong is still doing well. But yeah, I saw Analote raise her hand, so maybe would you like to check in? Yeah.
Yes, just very briefly. I mean, I echo what Viveka's saying, that of course, with a lot of these data, there are some nuances and intricacies. And yes, absolutely, there's a very strong culture of giving in Hong Kong, which is reflected, I think, in that. But I would also still like to say, even though it is funding from individuals is the most important source of funding, just to explain how this is calculated, it is based on available funding, and that is the highest percentage. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is very high or sufficient. And we also ask the SDOs a question around whether they feel that the level of individual giving is high or low. And just to give a bit of context, half, and in some cases more than half of SDOs say that they feel the level of giving is low and should grow. So just to give context, yes, it is the most important source of funding, but there is a lot of pressure on these SDOs because, in fact, it's not as high as it could potentially be. So just to, that percentage doesn't actually say how much it is or how much of their financial needs it's actually meeting. So the fact that it is such an important source of funding means that more should be done to help kind of incentivize and support SDOs to attract more of it because they rely on it so heavily. So just my 2 cents worth.
Thanks, Anurag. And okay, so we have a few minutes left, and I think Eugenia asked a very current question talking about the effect of US aid. I typed my response from a Singapore perspective. I'm not sure whether China is the same issue, but I mean, in my perspective, you've seen the results from DJI that, for all 3 places, I think foreign funding is just really, really a small percentage. I personally see from the data that the effect will be limited. Of course, in China, personally, I feel it's a different thing with the political issue. That's a completely separate matter. So I'm not sure whether any of the panelists have anything to say that you can add on. Maybe I'll just ask the next question while you're thinking about this one. I think my last question is really about, today we also talk about the cross-border, right? So I think, cross-border collaboration, I think is still at a very nascent stage, right? Given, the social sector is largely domestic focused, right? When today we want to stretch the boundary a little bit, right? To talk about cross-border. Maybe you can answer either of this question, what are the cross-border opportunity that you see, right, in the philanthropy space, in the social sector space, or you can talk about, if there is a particular strength in your community in the social sector, in the philanthropy sector that, you would like to share with other places, what would that be? Right, so you can choose to answer either of that question, or feel free to, you want to address the US aid question as well. Yeah.
Let me go first this time because Professor Lan has always been going first. To Eugenia's question, similar to Peter, it's not so much of a concern because foreign funding here in Hong Kong is very low. But I would say a larger question that she brings out in this is that the diversification of funding for a lot of NGOs. So that goes back to what I mentioned in terms of the sustainability. For NGOs, if you only have nonprofit organizations, if you have only one or single source or a couple of big funders, it's always important and necessary to think about how do you diversify your funding source and how do you potentially even generate funding yourself in order to sustain. So I just wanted to make a very quick comment here. I can go on to talk a little bit about cross-border collaboration opportunities. One thing I do feel Hong Kong has a lot to offer in terms of possibilities is corporate engagement. When I look at my NGO peers, especially those leaders from the smaller size of NGOs, they are remarkably creative, innovative, and resilient. There's a lot of people who want to support the NGO sector in Hong Kong as well. And these are all incredible strengths for the social sector. But in terms of corporate engagement, I feel that it needs a lot of creativity, compassion, and the communication in order to identify that common ground, because nonprofit versus corporate sector, whether it's CSR or corporate philanthropy, or these days there's the corporate HR involving the nonprofit sector in their leadership development opportunities for the new managers. No matter which form of corporate engagement it is, it does require a lot of kind of collaboration and co-creation among these two types of organizations. And I feel that many of the Hong Kong nonprofit organizations excel in these areas, showing that incredible creativity. Just very quickly, there's an example I want to share is MTR has the Metro company here in Hong Kong. They have worked with two nonprofit organizations. One is Zubin Foundation, the other one is True Color Symphony. Both work at the forefront of promoting social inclusion. So what they did is that they offer workshops for the MTR staff and families on how to upcycle those retired parts of MTR into musical instruments. So it can be a chair or handrail. And then what's more exciting is that they then hosted a community concert targeted on the wider public, especially public that have less opportunity to engage some of those musical performances. So that's a great example of how corporate engage with nonprofit, but also engage with multiple nonprofit organizations to achieve that shared vision of different organizations. And then just very quickly to end this, what I have to say is that I feel there's a lot of expertise in Hong Kong among the different NGOs, be it a social service organization or a smaller nonprofit organizations. A lot of expertise in terms of knowledge areas, topical areas or themes, but a lot of knowledge, expertise in terms of how to execute the programs as well. And we'd be more than happy to share with our colleagues, friends, fellows from Singapore or from China or from other parts of Asia. Also, I feel there's a lot of learning we can learn from other parts of Asia. I used to work on activities and grants making across Asia, and I know there's a lot of dynamism in other parts of Asia who may not be doing so well yet on that DGI index, but there are many, many different things we can learn from each other. So occasion like this, really, really grateful for Peter and your colleagues at Empact to really pilot this and having us come together and talk about what we can learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Viveka. Yeah, I think I got reminded by my team that time is almost up. I think maybe I just put on this on screen. So as before I pass to Dr. Lan, I just wanted to put on this feedback form a QR code on the screen while you're listening in the last few minutes. I really just appreciate your perspective, and letting us know about your feedback of this event. And also, if you would like to connect to any of us, feel free to put in your contact and let us know what are the aspects that you wish to connect further. Right. So there's two parts. Those who can access Google Form is on the left, right? Those who can't is largely using WeChat. There is a WeChat a QR code as well. So your feedback will be through WeChat. Maybe Dr. I pass to you. Maybe just a quick 1 or 2 minutes. A comment on the questions.
Well, my turn for questions.
Oh, okay. Yeah. If you have anything to add about, what are do you see that any possibility of collaboration, or you see that, in China, there's a particular strengths and assets in the social sector that others can learn from?
Okay. Firstly, I'd like to see that actually I can see there are opportunities, especially between Southeast countries, especially Singapore and China, mainland China. First, from the perspective of donors, in the past 40 years, now there are a new rich class in China, right? Some of them are trying to find the new ways of to arrange their wealth, and especially on the topic of family philanthropy and the legacy. And I think, especially in the ethnic Chinese community, there are a lot of experience and expertise in Singapore and Malaysia or Indonesia, in these countries. And I think there is a very strong need for the new rich classes, rich people in mainland China. So maybe there are capacity building and consulting or collecting needs for them, to connect them with the philanthropists in South East countries, especially for the ethnic Chinese rich people, right? So that is one thing. From the perspective of NGOs in China, some of the NGOs are trying to seek new funding resources abroad. So that also needs expertise. So that is from the needs. That is from perspective of needs from China, right? And on the other hand, China has also have some strengths in this sector. For example, the progress or diversity of online philanthropy and the corporate philanthropy in the past years. There are a lot of new ways and innovations. I think those new ways, especially how to embed the given behavior in the daily life of ordinary people, right? So we have a lot of experience in China, especially by those very big company, Tencent or ByteDance, where those companies have a lot of innovative ways to do things. And the second is, in China, we have a lot of organizations who are have rich experience to cooperate with the government, and how to leverage the government to achieve the NGOs own goals. So that's also another strength. And surely the third one is all kinds of cross-sector innovations, such as impact investment, social value investment, all those kind of things. There are many new things are happening in this sector. So I think we have a lot in common, and we have a lot, especially new in China. So so there is a lot of opportunity for organizations from different countries to share their own experiences. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Maybe I just go last. I feel I personally see a lot of collaboration opportunity, especially in two areas. One is on capacity building. I feel that capacity building is very common, right? So you have heard about sustainability, you have heard about drive from output to outcome to impact, all these things. I feel, yes, they may need contextualization, but the percentage is very small. I think our collective experience, especially, that's the reason why Empact wanted to go outside of Singapore and want to learn from other countries and also share a bit of our experience. And I mentioned that Singapore does particularly well in volunteer management, in terms of tech, in terms of some kind of the back end capacity building piece. And I would like to contribute and also learn in the same time. So that's one part. I feel capacity building is an opportunity. The other piece I feel missed the opportunity at this moment, and I feel is really about on particular social causes. We can have more collaboration in terms of intervention method and how effective they are, and whether we can learn from each other, right? Just giving an example, recently we did a youth mental health webinars across different urban cities in Asia, and doing the research, we find that the youth are now face very similar challenges in depression, in a certain kind of pressure they have to deal with in schools, at home, and etc. And I really feel that some of the solution for big cities can be potentially scaled and learned from each other. And I think those cause-based collaboration and learning from each other is absolutely critical, and that represents another opportunity for some of the great solution to be scaled and reduce learning costs. So these are the two sort of opportunity I see. Yeah, okay, with that, I know that we have passed maybe 7 minutes. I think last but not least, I just want to really give my sincere gratitude to Viveka, to Dr. Lan, to Analote, and thank you for the partnership and also accepting my request to try this new format. Thank you so much for this opportunity to work together, to bring data, to bring insights, and adding on the cross territory potential collaboration and learning from each other. So thank you so much. Okay, before I pass the slides, I think the last one, I just want to share my thanks to those participants who are here, especially those who have filled in the long DJI surveys for the nonprofit partners. Thank you so much for making your time here. And also, I want to shout out to Weiping, to Joyce, to Mindy, who maybe are still here for being the expert and spending your time, right, just to really having robust discussion with us to shape the report. So thank you so much for volunteering your time and contributing your expertise as well. So yeah, thank you. We're not sure whether there's any final thoughts you have. Okay, if not, I think that would be end of today's event. So thank you again, for joining us, and do help keep in touch. Help filling the feedback form, or you feel free to reach out to us individually, and if there's any connection, we're more than happy to do that. Yeah, thank you so much, and hope to see you guys in the next DJI event.